Little Hot Stove Baseball on this Wednesday. Steve Gardner from USA Today, kind enough to join me for a couple moments. Steve, I hope all is well. I know busy time for you.
Oh, certainly is, Rich. But it's a fun time. We never know. It's like the Christmas presents. You never know what's going to be in the next box. And right now, the one that was open was Marcell Ozuna to the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the Ohtani for a moment. The Angels confirmed that I guess he had that plasma injection, if you will. First of all, that's something that they do routinely over there. I don't know if there's cause for concern, but how big of a signing is it? Well, this signing to me tells me that Mike Trout's not going anywhere for a while, because now you actually add another piece. But how good is this player, or how good can this player be in the States?
Right. We don't know how good he is, but he's definitely a player with incredibly high potential. And, he could be one of the elite pitchers in all of baseball, assuming that, that his elbow is healthy and he's able to pitch this season and pitch effectively. But this is a guy who, he hits 100 miles per hour and above. There are not too many of those pitchers who can do that in the game today. So right away, he's in an elite class. Plus, he's got other pitches that are above average. This is a player who could be a huge difference maker just with his arm. And you throw in the bat as well as somebody who can hit, 10, 15 home runs, maybe, could hit 30 if he played every day. I think this could be a game changer, especially because of the price tag. He doesn't cost the Angels hardly anything, and that was the big problem for them, is that they were so hamstrung by first the Josh Hamilton contract and the Albert Pujols contract. Now they get a top-quality pitch or a player that they don't have to pay that much to, and that should help them to make the other additions that maybe they couldn't have made otherwise.
Why do you think he spurned the big markets like New York or Boston, Chicago?
I don't. It certainly wasn't money, because the amounts that they could give him were so small in comparison to what he could have gotten had he waited for 2 more years and been an unrestricted free agent. So it had to be the fact that the Angels would be willing to let him play on a regular basis in the field. I think that's part of the presentation that you had to make to him, because that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be that groundbreaking kind of player, and the Angels were certainly, they certainly have a need in the starting rotation for somebody who, is a number 2, number 1 type starter, and they could give him those opportunities in the field, because they could put Albert Pujols maybe at first base, or switch him in and out, and give Pujols a few days off and let Ohtani at DH for a couple days a week.
Well, that was the big move in the AL, and then the shockwaves across the winter meetings. You have Cashman making a stunning blockbuster deal with Derek Jeter, the desperate Marlins. They now they land a 28-year-old slugger, the reigning NL MVP in Stan. And, you look at this lineup, and you think about it from top to bottom, it got even more powerful. And listen, I know when you break down the money, you're talking about $295 million over the next 10 years. So the Yankees have said we'll make it a mandate that they'll get under that $197 million luxury tax threshold for 2018. But the bottom line is this: you are bringing in that caliber player at in the prime of his career, and you're adding it to that lineup in that ballpark. I mean, that's got to be a scary proposition for the rest of the AL and their pitching staffs.
No doubt about it. This is a Yankees team that led the majors in home runs last year, even without Giancarlo Stanton, and now to have the major league's top home run hitter on top of that, this could be a historically great offensive juggernaut. And I know that the Yankees did have to kind of trade away Starlin Castro and Chase Headley to make it work payroll-wise, but you still have Gleyber Torres coming up through the minor leagues, who's a fantastic prospect that they got in the Aroldis Chapman deal. And, Ronald Torreyes wasn't terrible last year, so he could slot in at one of those, second base or third base. This is definitely Yankee fans have to be over the moon right now to get Stanton in that lineup.
Yeah, and they didn't give up Florio as well, and they didn't give up Andujar. So you got their number 1, 2, and 5 prospects out of the deal. What's kind of been the trickle-down effect now in the rest of baseball, like the thoughts? Because it seems, listen, the Yankees, when you have the money, you should spend it. I mean, because conversely,
Right.
you look what's going on with the Mets, and Alderson comes out and says, well, we want to keep our payroll at X amount of dollars. Well, they know no matter what, they're always going to compete with the Yankees. But to be fair, all these other teams, it's not as though some of them have the money. They just choose not to make this move or at least inquire about the trade.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, every single major league club, even the Marlins, are hugely profitable, and it's just a decision of ownership as to how far you want to go in pursuit of getting some of these higher-priced players. And it seems like, I think Sandy Alderson was quoted the other day as saying, people are making too much out of our payroll. It's like, well, it's because you're not spending any on it. You're not adding to the team, and you're being, I guess, penny wise and pound foolish is the old hackneyed phrase there.
Yeah. Let's bring it to our backyard with the Philadelphia Phillies. A couple moves. And listen, when we spoke to Scott Profrak about 2 months ago, I asked him about the bullpen, and I kind of had an idea they were going to shop around. They were going to be buyers as opposed to sellers. They make the move for Tommy Hunter. I know there was a report about Addison Reed. It wasn't accurate, but they also signed Nishak. So now that's you're talking about two big bullpen signings in 3 days. Nishak gets the 2-year contract. So what they provided now is a little sturdy setup, a little depth behind Hector Neris. And I know there's also talk that maybe the Phillies are interested in Cesar Hernandez. I'm sorry, the Mets are interested in Cesar Hernandez from the Phillies. I'll get to their infielder in a second, but how about the fact that they upgraded their bullpen?
No, it's an excellent move. I mean, the Phillies bullpen wasn't too terrible, I guess, last year. But the thing is you've got to get some depth in that pitching staff on the starting side. Aaron Nola is a fine, everyday pitcher. You can put him out there as long as he can stay healthy. He's got that number 2, number 1, maybe upside, but you've got to fill in behind him. And that's where, when the Phillies are really ready, I think this team is scratching the surface of one that could be a playoff contender fairly soon. But when you're ready to make that move from rebuilding to contending, you're going to have to rebuild that pitching staff. You're going to have to bolster that pitching staff. And, it depends on, if a Lance Lynn is somebody that they're thinking about adding, if they want to jumpstart that process now. But that's where the next step is going to have to come. And, some good young hitters, I think that's certainly a positive thing for the Phillies. But, yeah, just watching the bullpen, I think that's a safe way to start building a nice floor. But if you're going for the ceiling, it's going to have to be starting pitching is going to have to either develop from the system or go outside, make a trade, or sign a free agent.
And the Nishak, to me, it's a smart move because he spent the first 3+ months of last season with the Phils, and then he gets traded to Colorado. I think he earned a second All-Star nod. So he had a pretty nice stint with the Phillies' career year. I mentioned Hernandez, and I'm just wondering, we look at the Mets, and they have a surplus of starting pitching. I mean, what if the Phillies turn around and say they want to package Hernandez and maybe a prospect or two, can you see them entertaining a club like the Mets who have a surplus of starting pitching to bring back a starter? Because I think at the end of the day, they need someone to complement Nola.
Yeah, I think that certainly from a Phillies point of view, that's what you need to do. And, basically along the same lines, they're thinking what I was thinking earlier, when we were talking about improving that pitching staff. I worry, though, about the Mets. If they're going to go to a 6-man rotation and do all of these things to lengthen out that staff and not force them to throw so many innings, I don't know. Even it may look like the Mets have starting pitching depth. If they continue to do what they say they want to do, I don't know that they have enough depth to do that. So it's an open question whether Hernandez gives them something to gives them enough to deal away some of that young pitching depth.
Well, but so let me go back to Philly for a second. So I know there's three names out: Darvish, Arrieta. I know Chris Archer's name has been peppered around. If you're the Phillies and you have a deep farm system and you've got young players, especially these young infielders that you think you can grow with, for a fact you are going to need another arm. Some of those guys that I just mentioned, would they be scared off because they're free agents and they're going to command a ton of money, or they're going to want a ton of money. But that's kind of where I'm thinking, like, you're talking about top-level starters right there.
Yeah. Well, I think back to when the Washington Nationals were really, really bad, and they maybe paid more than they should have for Jason Worth, and everybody was saying what a horrible deal it was. But it established the Nationals as a team that was willing to start building and willing to pay for top dollar and ready to get better. I think, if they were to sign a Darvish or an Arrieta or somebody like that, or make or Lance Lynn or make a trade for somebody like Archer, I think it might send that kind of a message to free agents down the road that this is a team that is ready to make that move. So it doesn't seem, in that light, doesn't seem so far-fetched to me, and especially when you can have a team that's improving, that gets players like Rhys Hoskins, that takes your offense up a notch. I think that could be something that you shouldn't overlook the Phillies as a team that could make one of those big splash type moves.
There's a name floating out there, and I know, Philly fans, they'll probably be like, "Are you kidding me?" You have a free agent, pending Miguel Cabrera, and I know last year he didn't have a good year. That whole team, they basically just quit. To me, there's something to be said about bringing a guy in who's a veteran guy. I personally think Boston is going to eventually make a move for him, and I think it'll rejuvenate his career. You say at his age you get 2 to 3 really solid years out of him, but can you see the Phillies maybe going after that type of bat, that type of player with his type of pedigree? And I'm just using that as an example. And maybe not this year, but maybe down the road.
Yeah, it's definitely possible, and you'd have to find a position, though. I think with a veteran player, it's tougher to do in the National League, where you have to play in the field every day. And if Miguel Cabrera were going to be that kind of a player, he would be an American League guy. Nobody else would think about it. That's what it concerns me a little bit about J.D. Martinez and how he might age. Wherever he goes, it seems like if he wants a long-term contract, he's going to have to go to an American League team that can kind of shuffle him off, because he's not a great defensive player as it is, and as he gets older, he's only going to get worse. So you'd have to find somebody that would be able to give you that if you're the Phillies, and be able to continue to play in the field somewhere. So maybe third base. Somebody like, just throwing names out. Like an Evan Longoria or somebody like that, who can still get the job done defensively, but provide you with that kind of leadership and that kind of a bat that hasn't completely gone in the tank because of age-related decline.
Yeah, you mentioned Martinez. I know the Red Sox are going to go after him, and he's, I think, 29, 30 years old. I mean, he had a pretty solid year, not like the year he had a couple of years ago with when he had, 45 home runs a couple of years ago, but he put up some big numbers this year. How about Machado? Where do you think, if anything? I mean, do you think this is the year that, say, the Yankees or the Red Sox or another said team lands Manny Machado, or do you think it'll potentially be next year when he's a free agent?
I think the Orioles have seen the handwriting on the wall there in the AL East. They'd contended for the past 5 or 6 years and had always been a solid team. I think the Orioles were either 1 or 2 in the American League in total victories since 2010. So, I mean, it's a team that had competed, but with the Yankees getting Stanton and all the young players that they have there, and the Red Sox with a solid club and a good farm system, I think the Orioles may need to reevaluate things. And the one huge trade chip that they have, I don't think they're going to be able to compete with those two teams this year, but the one trade chip that they have is a full year of Manny Machado. And anybody in their right minds would love to have a shortstop, and Manny wants to play shortstop, who could hit as well as he is and is such a factor on offense. So I think we will see Manny Machado traded at some point this season. Don't know if it's going to be before the season, but certainly by the time the trade deadline rolls around, he's going to be a huge commodity that they'll have plenty of suitors. They just have to determine what their return is going to be and how much they want to get, because I don't think there's any way they're going to be able to re-sign him once he becomes a free agent.
Last one before I let you get out of here. Again, Steve Gardner from USA Today covers baseball, does a great job. A couple minutes on a Wednesday. Jack Morris, Alan Trammell, both voted into the Hall of Fame by the Modern Era Committee. I think it's long overdue for Jack Morris. I thought Alan Trammell was a great player. You followed his career, obviously, more than I did. You talk about that 84 Tigers team. You talk about Trammell and Whitaker. How about thoughts on those two finally getting in?
I'm kind of flipped from what you are. I thought Trammell was overdue to go in. He was a guy that was overlooked because of the greatness of Cal Ripken and Barry Larkin and Ozzie Smith, and he was kind of in that that little no zone between the way how you had defensive shortstops and then you had a raft of offensive shortstops. He was both, and he was good at both, but he wasn't. He didn't supersede everybody, and I think he was so good and deserved a longer look by the BBWAA. Jack Morris has gone back and forth in terms of analytics, and it seems like there's an eye test group that keeps going back to that Game 7 of the World Series and his great outing there, and giving him that check mark there. And then the other group that said, well, he has a 3.90 career ERA, and was he really as good as his reputation stated? I'm happy for both of them, and while I can say I think that Trammell maybe should have gone in and maybe Morris shouldn't have, both were great players, and so once the committee has spoken, I think I'm perfectly fine with that, and I'm happy to see both of those two in, and especially happy for Tiger fans who saw both of those guys for a good portion of their careers, Trammell for all of his, and we're thrilled for them too.
I just pulled this up before I let you go. Morris won 20 games 1, 2, 3 times in his career. He was 28 years old when he won his first when he won 20. 31 when he won 21, and then 37 when he won 21. Prior to that, 18, 15, 6, 15, 18. Won 19 games once, 254, 186, as you mentioned, 3.90 ERA. Let me just pull up his whip, his strikeouts. 2,400 strikeouts, whip 1.296. I go to what you said. I think they're enamored with that playoff run, right? And 7-4 in the playoffs, and you go to the 84 and you go to 91, and I think, I know exactly. The more I think about it, I know exactly what you're saying. I don't think he ever finished. He never won a Cy Young.
Right.
Yeah. And
he was the definition of a workhorse. You know, he was a number one starter. He was a guy that took the ball every 5th day or every 4th day. Back in the four-man rotation. Whatever. My math is off there, but every 5th day, and was a guy that wouldn't miss a start every year. He would give you 200+ innings, and I think that that's a quality that certainly deserves to be celebrated. And you're not going to see players like that, with the way that the game has changed today.
Yeah, and comparable careers: Dennis Martinez, Bob Gibson, Louis Tiant. Jamie Moyer, a little more of a compiler late in his career. But, hey, that's what makes it interesting. Sometimes it's great to be that fly on the wall when they do the voting and whatnot. All right, my friend, I know it's a busy time. I always appreciate a couple moments. We will talk very soon. Have a great holiday, and I'm sure we'll talk in the next couple of weeks, and we'll kind of put a bow on everything that's going on baseball-wise.
Sounds great. Same to you, Rich. We'll talk next time.
You got it. Appreciate it. Take care. Steve Gardner from USA Today.